Welcome to another episode of the 360 Salesforce Mastermind podcast. In today's episode, or in this episode, we have Will Sun from Auctor, a new company out there. He founded a company with some co-partners and co-founders. Avinash, what was your perspective and thoughts on this episode with Will?
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. Obviously, the age of the founders, they're super young, like really talented. But what struck the most to me is how it started. And this goes back to the best of ideas come out or get generated in like the most unexpected circumstances. So this idea, how Will was sharing that, he was talking to an his past roommate, I believe, a friend or a roommate who was working at Deloitte. I don't know if that person is still working at Deloitte, who just came home like super frustrated with one of the project and shared like why it didn't work and everything, like what's everything going wrong. And that triggered, that sparked an idea like, okay, implementation projects doesn't have to go this way. It can be done a lot better. And how about we fix that problem? And then he went on to talk to many thought leaders in the ecosystem. I know he reached out to you, he reached out to me, he got our perspective, and then ultimately they built the Auctor AI, or they call it the get Auctor. So that whole journey, how it's sparked from a casual venting conversation to a friend to a point where it's running a successful revenue generating startup backed by some of the major VCs out there. I think that the whole journey at such a young age really impressed me and caught my attention.
I agree. And I think one of the key learnings that someone founding a company or a Salesforce consultancy is what they did was they understood the problems and challenges that people have and built solutions around the problems, and didn't think of new ideas that they didn't validate or understood fully to solve. A lot of people build apps and they think it's like a new restaurant in town, right? It's like if it's totally different, you don't know for sure if it is going to work. But they did the upfront, 6 to 12 months of talking to founders, consultancies, et cetera. What are your pain points and challenges? And I think what Auctor does and what they're focused on is everything pre-sales, discovery, statements of work, proposals, and solving those pain points, where every consultancy, anyone that's ever worked projects like that, you're sitting up at all night working on PowerPoints, aligning text, aligning fields, and it definitely, with what we heard from Auctor, is a great idea and a app that they created, but also the energy. It's great to be young. He talks about how their typical day is. They pretty much work around the clock. There's some really good stories in there. And that also inspired me a little bit as well. Just hearing about how him and his co-founders operate and work every day. It sounds pretty exciting and cool. Did you have anything else to add, Avinash?
No, I think it was a very interesting conversation. I think he had great insights to share in terms of where AI is heading and everything. The only other thing is this is probably the only episode where we recorded it around 10 Eastern. So it's a very different time, and that just speaks to the crazy work schedule that these guys have. So yeah, this will definitely be a good one.
Awesome. Yep. Let's dive in. How you doing, Will?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And just to set the stage, I know you've launched Auctor. It's been on social media. You're in the middle of it. It's kind of cool. You guys are kind of living the San Francisco, kind of like the entrepreneur thing. You guys are working 23 hours a day, all that kind of stuff. So a little bit backwards a little bit. Can you give a little background on how this journey started, what you did before you got into Auctor, and kind of let everyone know about that?
Of course, yeah. I'll probably take it back to the beginning years of college. So I went to school at Johns Hopkins University, and funnily enough, I came into college as a pre-med and quickly realized that I didn't want to be a doctor. But ultimately, because I was a pre-med, I studied biomedical engineering during my time at Hopkins, along with computer science. And so originally, given that I was a biomedical engineer, I started off in the medtech space. So worked for various medtech companies before trying and starting my own medical device company. It went somewhere, we exited, but I quickly realized that hardware is incredibly hard to scale. And this was when we were still feeling the results of COVID. And supply chain was a huge issue. And so I ended up going into the software side of things, working for various AI startups out in the Valley. Granted, a lot of it was still remote. But what really sparked the idea behind Auctor was actually very serendipitous. I'm originally from Ohio, and I have a buddy there, and he originally was doing software engineering at Deloitte. And I would catch up with him, every so often. And there was this one time where he had gotten staffed on this 3-year long ERP implementation for like one of the states in the US. And from then on, every time I called him, he would not stop complaining to me about how much how painful it was. I'm not going to say how much he hated it, but how painful it was to just go through this 3-year long process, how much was spent just like going back and forth, going over the same things, and just how like this implementation end to end was just so fragmented. And in this day and age with AI and all this technology, I couldn't help but realize like what is going on here, right? And so that was really the inception of the idea. And from there, I ultimately had over 100 different conversations with system integrators. So these were from your individual subcontractors all the way to the Deloittes and Accentures of the world to get an understanding of the workflow, the pain points. Not even saying, hey, I'm going to build a business around here. I just was so curious as to why it just took so long to do one software implementation. And through these various conversations, the idea of how I could really attack the industry and really help solve a lot of the inefficiencies changed throughout the process. So in the very beginning, I was exploring the idea of, okay, what if I built agents for Salesforce implementations, specifically Salesforce configurations, or agents that would help you configure SAP or Oracle, or name your favorite complex enterprise software. But after these conversations, I realized that's not the pain. The pain isn't configuring Salesforce. It's not writing the code. It's everything before. It's gathering the requirements, getting the designs that you ultimately pass off into configuration. And a lot of that is a people problem, right? It's a process misalignment issue with the clients that you're working with, where there's just tons of miscommunication between what the client needs, what they want, the business processes, and ultimately translating that into the technical specs that you go and can configure your Salesforce. And so that's kind of where, the idea came from and where I came from in terms of Hopkins. But yeah, it was very serendipitous.
It's a very interesting take, Will. And for audience benefit, I do also come from the Deloitte background. In fact, like the majority of my career has been with Deloitte. And this is very interesting, what you shared. Obviously, you bring an outsider perspective, but what you just mentioned is for most of us, like most of our listeners, it's still part of our day to day. That is something that we've been doing over and over again, year after year. So what struck you if I can call out a number one pain point, because you're talking about challenging work that's been done certain way, by companies that people would die to get into, because this is not just Deloitte, your McKinsey, BCG, I'm sure there's still many graduates out of Johns Hopkins would die to get into any of these firms. So what struck you is something that these guys are doing, which is I would say probably horribly wrong.
Yeah. I think what struck me was what I realized is a lot of the times when, before you start implementing Salesforce or before you start implementing anything, what I started asking people was okay, how do you get aligned on what exactly needs to be done? And I remember very vividly, I was talking to this firm that's probably close to 2,000 people. And they said that every time that they have a project, for each project, in terms of the teams on that project, they would have a 15, 20-minute sync where they would try to get everyone in a room and then talk about it and be like, okay, are we aligned? And then from there, that was it. And in my head, I'm like, of course there's going to be misalignment. Someone's going to be having a bad day. They don't want to talk, or they forgot something. And then not only that, like, you don't have all the contextual information of your firm, of your previous implementations. Like, for example, if you're a more junior folk, maybe you don't have the context of something like a senior folk would have. And so being able to like that is the current status quo in some of these firms, where it's like you just sit down and try to talk about it, or a lot of things are lost over email or other communication channels. And so that's when I was like, okay, like there has to be a way we can bring technology into the mix of this, especially to stay aligned, given that at the end of the day, the beginning is so important to ultimately a successful implementation.
Yeah, if it's 15, 20 minutes, I would still say they're very efficient. It's usually weeks spent before a project starts. Like,
Yes.
so there's like prep to the prep. There's this joke in the consulting world, like, you have a meeting and then you have a prep meeting to prep for the action.
Yes, exactly.
So then how did how did the aspect of AI come into the picture as you were going through talking with these over 100 firms?
Yeah.
Consultants, was in the back of your mind always that AI was going to be part of the solution, or did that become after the fact, or did you not know? How did that all come about?
Yeah, frankly, I think like with GPT coming out, like, at this point, like already a couple of years, like we're seeing just how powerful, these foundation models and the application of these foundation models can be. And so, in the very beginning, it was just, being able to chat with it, right? But, now people are finding vertical applications of, these models. And it's like, this application layer of things. And you're seeing so much value being created from being able to apply, this technology to something that is incredibly purpose-built for an industry and one niche or one space. And so to me, it was inevitable, right? Like, I think AI will really propagate across all these different industries. And in my head, from all of these conversations, I couldn't help but think, how is AI going to affect this? And so when I was going into these conversations, I kind of had that in the back of my head. Obviously, I wouldn't try and, jam it down into one specific solution, but just there, right? Like, it's here. There's this technology that can do this really, really cool thing. Maybe there's a way we can apply it to some problems. So yeah, that's kind of how I was thinking.
Right. I know a lot of people try to, especially in the Salesforce world, I joke about this all the time. They try to just bring up ChatGPT and build this Apex class for me. And it's like, there's no context. And I know we're going to get into context. And they're like, it doesn't work. It's like, that's not how you use it.
Exactly.
It's not going to work that way. So then from the next step from there, you're talking to people, over 100 conversations. Were you developing on the side? Was it after that you planned with your co-founders? I know you have co-founders as well.
Yeah.
What was kind of the next stage after that?
Yeah. So like I said, I had all of these different conversations, and, mind you, at this point, like, the first 10 conversations I had, I was still very new to this system integrator world, right? The world of software implementations, all of these different artifacts, the process of going through an end-to-end implementation, like, this is all super new, right? So in the very beginning, it was still just like getting an understanding and a feel of what I was working with. By the 20th, 30th conversation, I had a pretty good understanding, right? And I started seeing patterns in terms of the pain points and what people were saying. And it was around that 30 mark that I started on a piece of paper, well, more specifically on a Word doc, I started writing down some pain points and what I hypothesized as a potential solution to those pain points. And I just kept having those conversations and kept iterating on that piece of paper until I came across like 2 or 3 features that I thought would be pretty cool to solve these pain points. And then what I started doing is, when I had these conversations, I would take this piece of paper and kind of go over with whoever I was chatting with and be like, hey, does this make sense to you? And then I would iterate on that and I would get their feedback. And it got to the point where I had this piece of paper. I'd gotten it in front of at least 5 decision makers at these big system integrator firms. And they were like, Will, like, if you made that, like, you are going to transform the industry. Like, this is going to be huge, like, blah, blah, blah. And it was only then when I finally had conviction from the market and what we could potentially build. Then I brought on my co-founders. Like, at this point, I'd been entertaining the idea with them and be like, hey, I'm having these conversations. But it wasn't until I had the conviction in the fact that the market actually needed it did I go and find these, my co-founders, because, these guys are the smartest guys I've known. And I wouldn't want to like waste their time on anything that's like not worthwhile. So yeah, that's kind of where I built that conviction.
So how did you get time for these decision makers? Like, I know you spent like past couple of years in the startup ecosystem. You've been a co-founder, then you've been an investor. You work, so you've been like living in this ecosystem for the past couple of years. Has that helped in any way? Because I think of like if someone reaches out like, "Hey, I want to pick your brains on implementation," like, sure, like,
Yeah.
we will get to it. So
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
often than not, those messages don't go unanswered. So
Yeah.
how did you
I mean,
get their attention?
I wish I had a silver bullet on how to get people to respond to cold messages. If I
Yes, we're
had
launching
that,
a mastermind
yeah, like
5,000.
once I figure that out, like I won't even have to work on Auctor. Like if you could just figure out like, all right, I have a 100% open rate, like that'd be great. But no, I think a lot of it was, first of all, just like being super respectful of people's times, and being incredibly transparent with like what you're trying to do. So, a lot of times I just like, hey, like, I'm just trying to reach out and, like you said, learn a little bit more. And obviously that hit rate isn't going to necessarily be there. But I think sometimes what people resonated with was, I was a little bit on the younger side of things, like, and people were like, okay, like, you're reaching out to a pretty senior decision maker and you're just trying to learn a little bit more. Sometimes, people are very willing to spare a couple minutes. And you really just, within those couple of minutes, you really have to show like, okay, like, do your research, do your homework. And what I realized is very quickly, I had to start speaking the same language as the system integrator in the broader software implementation space. And the more I had these conversations, the more I became attuned to the language. And it got to the point where I started having conversations where people were like, okay, like, I've been in the industry for 20 years. Like, how do you know these certain nuances? And I think it's really just being curious about whatever you're talking about, and just being transparent.
But I think that you hit the nail on the head, like, which is super important. Like, know your audience, do your research, and be crisp. Great work.
And I'll never forget that because I know we connected last month. I'll never forget it because I think I mentioned to you, I probably get like 1,000 cool things a month. And I'm like, I'm going to respond to this one. Like this is interesting. Like he struck a pain point or a nerve. He said something that resonated with me. And I think that's what also people need to take away is like, if you DM people like, hey, I have $25 an hour offshore resources, no one cares.
Yeah.
But the message you had, it resonated immediately, and I think we pretty much connected almost virtually in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that story. It was awesome. Like, just keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I obviously very much appreciate you like giving me the chance to get to have that conversation with you. But I think like what you were saying, like to that point, is after sending so many of those outbounds, and having those conversations, it really made me realize, okay, like how am I going to basically perfect a pitch that one grabs their attention on what exactly the pain point is, and then two, like where I think a potential solution could fit. And that's it. Like no one really wants to hear any fluff when it comes to an outbound. Like you're already kind of quote unquote wasting their time. So get to the point, and so, I hope to do that as I continue to do those things.
That's awesome.
Just taking on that outreach point, like, purely out of curiosity, have any of tools come to your benefit? Did you find any software tools that helped you?
Yeah, honestly, I explored a ton. What's been just super helpful is just LinkedIn. Honestly, I think like at least in the system integrator space, I think a lot of folks are on LinkedIn. You got folks like both of you guys where you guys are kind of like thought leaders in the space. And that's obviously incredibly helpful. And so it's really making sure you know where your audience is. And I think what I've identified is a lot of that audience is on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Awesome. And to I guess jump to Auctor.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
Totally.
And I know you had an announcement this week. You had a launch a week or two ago. Combinator even mentioned it today.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't familiar with Y Combinator as well, but I guess in an overall sense for the listeners, can you give some background on, I mean, it's an exciting week. It's been an exciting 2 weeks. I know you're
Yeah.
working around the clock. Just what's going on with Auctor? You're launching, why Combinator, how that all fits together,
Yeah.
and just kind of hit people with
Of course.
it.
Of course. So Y Combinator is a very, very notable startup accelerator out here in San Francisco. And ultimately they try to be the first believers in whatever you're building, and they will, give you an upfront investment in which then you participate in their Y Combinator program. It's a couple month program where a lot of it is just, yourself building the company that you get in for, but then they also host events with very notable people in the tech ecosystem. The partners that you get paired with are incredible resources and really are just a way to help you and guide you along the way of building your business. A lot of the times, or basically, I'm pretty sure every single partner is an ex-founder themselves who have exited and built hundreds and billion-dollar businesses. But in terms of YC themselves, some notable investments, they were the first believers in companies like Instacart, Coinbase, Airbnb, Brex, and Reddit. And so, there's some big names that get attached to YC. And so it's been an incredible experience to be a part of this. And to the point on the launches. So in the very beginning, we were building in stealth, which, in the tech world just basically means you're too early and you just want to be in your room coding.
Right.
But it got to the point where we actually had live customers, folks were giving us feedback on the platform. And so about 2.5 weeks ago, I basically publicly launched it on my LinkedIn, my own personal LinkedIn, where I was like, hey, we've been working on this. We were supposed to go to, a lot, my co-founders and we were supposed to go work full time for companies like Meta, AWS, Apple. And I made the post saying we just completely dropped all of that. And now we're working on this startup that, who knows, may or may not be successful. And I think people really resonated with it.
Love it.
I'm just seeing some younger entrepreneurs really taking the risk. So, that got a lot of traction. And then today what we did is we created a production grade launch video, basically kind of talking about the business. It was about 1.5 minutes. And Y Combinator posted it on their LinkedIn to kind of help promote it. So yeah, it's been a busy day, from launching to kind of keeping up with emails and demand, but all great problems to have.
Awesome. And I think Auctor. So I think we have SI partners that listen to this podcast. There's integrators. How does it help them? The pain points it solves, to kind of set the stage. What does Auctor do for SIs?
Totally. So what we do is we help digital transformation / system integrator firms, specifically those that implement complex and requirement heavy software. And what we do is we help them by using AI to automate a lot of the manual work that goes into not only gathering good requirements from your client, but also aligned ones. A huge problem that we've identified in the industry, and kind of like what we alluded to in the beginning, is that there's a ton of misalignment that happens in the early stages of an implementation, even in discovery too, of delivery, where clients a lot of times don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they want. And so there's a ton of misalignment in terms of their business processes, what they need from ultimately the software, and then translating that into technical requirements, specs, design documents, and artifacts that you ultimately go and configure whatever software it is. And so what we do is we help facilitate that requirement gather. We ensure that the requirements that you gather are fully aligned with your clients, and you don't have to repeat it twice, right? The client doesn't have to go through 40 different discovery calls and answer the same thing from the SI. So we're able to help facilitate that, and we help not only guide those conversations in discovery calls, but we generate the requirements that you would ultimately get out of those discovery calls. And we take those requirements and then we help create artifacts. So if it's in the pre-sales side of things, we help create artifacts like proposals, SOWs. And in the post-sales, we help create things like design documents, epics, user stories, acceptance criteria, and ultimately automating a lot of the labor-intensive parts and making handoff to configuration much easier, much smoother, and more aligned with your client. And then the other thing that we do is keep alignment there throughout the entire process. So let's say using our platform, you do one discovery call, you gather some requirements, and then you create a design document. What if you go into another discovery call and then the requirements change, or your client sends you an email?
Never happens.
It's absolutely inevitable, right? Like that's always going to happen. Your clients are always going to change their mind, and requirements are always going to be changing. And so there's one thing where, yeah, we can help gather those requirements. We can help create these artifacts very, very quickly using AI. But the other thing is we keep it aligned. So let's say you have another discovery call and 20 new requirements come in. What our platform is going to be able to do is actually be able to auto cascade those changes from those requirements to any downstream artifacts that may be affected. And then you might get a notification and say, hey, John, this requirement session just came in. These 10 requirements affected your design document in this way. And do you accept or deny the change? Still keeping the human in the loop, but really ensuring that you can just click a button and accept. And now that change is cascaded. You have full version control. And now you can continue to move on with implementation, right? So really ensuring this end-to-end workflow is as seamless and as smooth as possible.
So just breaking this down, I know that's a lot to consume for our audience, but
Totally.
Most of our audience are from this space, so they will appreciate or accept that our nature of work is repetitive. So what some of us have been doing the pre-AI era is like we've been taking what we produced, project after project after project, templatize it, and use it for future projects. So that's how we shrunk timelines, not necessarily shrunk timelines, but improved efficiency, delivered value in a very human manual fashion. So what you guys are doing is you're taking the fundamental of like readily reusable stuff that this industry brings to the table, and you're just like magnifying it probably like 10 times, maybe 100 times using AI.
Exactly. So like, you like you said, you hit the nail on the head. So like if you are going through an implementation, I think I'll also caveat with this is like for every client that you work with as a system integrator, like they're their own snowflake, right? They like to say that every client is different, etc. However, let's say you're a system integrator and you've done 5 Salesforce implementations in the past for manufacturing clients, and now you're doing a 6th one. Like there are going to be similarities in those 6 implementations, whether it be templates, frameworks, requirements, semantics, your way of work, how you do discovery, right? Like there's going to be similarities, and there's no reason on the 6th implementation it should take the same as it did on the 5th one. Like it should take much, much faster on the 6th one. And so that's what we're really leveraging AI to do as well. So before any of the system integrators goes onto our platform, we have a period of time where we ultimately create a knowledge graph of these system integrators using their previous implementation context, their documents, their templates, their semantics, where we ultimately create a knowledge graph that is the engine for the platform themselves when they're using it. And the other thing is obviously like every single client that uses our platform, they have their own instance of the platform. So their knowledge graph is their own knowledge graph. And so what this enables us to do is create extremely specific outputs for our clients. And not only that, it builds on itself as they continue to use the platform. So let's say I create a design doc using the Auctor platform, and then I make some suggestions or fill in something that wasn't complete. Now it learns from that, and that knowledge graph expands, and now we have more context. And so it's really leveraging the tribal knowledge of your firm, of implementations you've done in the past to make future ones much easier, much faster.
That's all. And I think
To clarify, I think what you're saying, like for our audience benefit, it's not about like reducing a 12-month implementation into 2 weeks. Yes, there's the speed to it, but I think more importantly, what you're saying is like using Auctor, you can create much more, generate much more quality output, like deliverables, so that you as an SI can focus more on the strategic conversations, like delivering true value, because the busy work is taken care of, and so you can like add more value and look like you're truly addressing the pain points versus even just doing the busy work.
No, totally. And I think the other thing is, right, like with better outputs that are more aligned and with our platform, like that saves time in itself, right? Like change orders and project extensions are almost inevitable for all of these different implementations. And the reason why that happens is because of the misalignment that happens in the beginning. And so if we're able to eliminate that altogether, you save a ton of time and future costs on that front. But not only that, if you can save time on discovery and create these artifacts, like what we're doing on the platform is actually creating net new output. So like we'll get you a proposal 60, 70% of the way there, or, a design doc 60, 70% of the way there. And you only have to go in and do the rest of the 30 or 40%. That's saving you more than, 50% of the time that it would have taken you to do that end to end. And because of that, you're able to do more projects. You're able to cut costs and, just basically multiply yourself as if you were hiring headcount without having to hire a headcount.
And I think for the visualization of this, I think one of the coolest features that you guys imagined was, and I don't know how to term it, I'm sure you have a word for it, but essentially the AI being live on these calls and listening and prompting in real time, and actually I'll call it the AI, I'm sure you have a better term.
Yeah.
Listens, it's tracking, it's prompting you for next questions. Can you talk about that side of things?
Of course.
For people to get a picture of that?
Of course. So to my earlier point on the fact that a lot of the times clients don't know what they don't know and they don't know what they want, it's important that when you're in your discovery calls that you really, probe a little bit in making sure that you get all of your questions answered in that discovery call and that you're fully aligned with your client, because it's for the better. If you're just saying, oh, like, yeah, that makes sense, then come out of it and it's like, what they say, then that's bad, right? And it's going to add pain for both you and your client. And so in order to ensure that, not only do you have to make sure you press them a little bit on anything that's vague or things that they're not super, clear about, but you also, as the consultant and as the person conducting the discovery call, also have to have the understanding of what to ask and what to probe your client a little bit deeper on. And even if you've been in the industry for 30 plus years, you're going to forget sometimes. Maybe you're tired or forgot something, and it's inevitable, right? And so given that our agents and the platform is grounded in the context of your tribal knowledge of the things that you've done in the past, of your other implementations, not only that, but also with the fact that it has context on the client that you're working with, our agents in real time during your discovery calls will act as an assistant to ensure that you ask all the needed questions and all the right questions to ultimately get what you need to create a proposal or artifacts. So as you were alluding to, while you're having these conversations on the platform, you will see an interface where our AI will give you suggestions on things you should follow up on in terms of your client, or maybe ask clarifying questions on, or give you a recommendation and be like, hey, we understand that your client is in the finance space, right? And within the finance space, you're going to see a hybrid of cloud and on-prem deployments, and maybe ask about that, right? And really contextualize everything in real time and give you suggestions to make sure you're gathering everything you need in those discovery calls.
Pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So, Will, tell us, I'm thinking, why shouldn't someone just make an API call to LLM and build this internally? Why shouldn't someone do this DIY? I might be thinking, I have developers, I can write something, make an API call to ChatGPT 4.0. I can't even keep up with those terminologies anymore. But why is it a bad idea?
Yeah, that's a great question, and honestly, something that is incredibly valid, and to be asking, and that's something that we've seen a lot of our current customers on the platform evaluate when they were deciding whether or not they wanted to move forward with Auctor, and ultimately, they made the decision to move forward with Auctor, and the reason is, at its core, these system integrators are services businesses, right? You're billing on the fact that you are, very client facing. You're spending your time working with your clients to help them with whatever implementation it is. It's not necessarily a product business, right? And what we're doing is our entire company is working on building this one platform, right? And we are spending, literally endless days just making this as perfect and as purpose built for the implementation workflow, making sure that outputs are as good as possible, where it's you don't necessarily, as a system integrator, have the time to be able to sacrifice and try and build something like this. And let's say you do, then you're going to start running out of resources, and you're splitting your time now between your core business and trying to build out these internal tools. And so I think that's a big core of it. And not only that, on the IP side of things, we're really trying to push the frontier in terms of being able to apply these models and give you the best possible outputs and experience as possible. So
it's a classic build versus buy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, especially with AI, instead of just because it has so much impact in what you're able to do, and like the results and the efficiencies that you can get out of it. You really want to make sure you're just using what's best in class. And a lot of the times, if you're distracted with your core business, you're going to produce something that, might work somewhat well, but maybe it's not the best in class. And now the folks that are using the best in class are going to be able to get efficiencies that are unachievable with what you've built internally, and then you fall behind. And so like in that case, it's really making sure you're using, what's best on the market.
And just to switch gears for just for one question. So
Yeah.
what's like a day in the life for like you and your co-founders? I know
Yeah.
there's 4 of
I
you
love
total. Like, what's going on?
I love that question.
So yeah, I think like eating ramen noodles.
Yeah, it's funny. Like there's this like small bodega like right here on the corner. And I remember when we first came in to SF, like they were a little bit like giving us the cold shoulder, like who are these people? Like why are they here? But I kid you, like they have a deli and they make sandwiches. And every day at like 12 p.m. like we go and get like 4 sandwiches and some chips. And at this point they know our entire order. We're boys with them. And so yeah, it's like, to answer your question, John, it is a absolute grind. I've never worked this hard before in my entire life, and neither have my co-founders. But we are enjoying every second of it, and we love it. And so like, I think a big part of that is also finding the right co-founders, because we are spending every waking moment together, like in an enclosed space in our living room, building this platform and this company. And so it's like, if you don't like him, it's over. Like it's actually over. So yeah, I mean, we're all great friends, and the day to day. So I will typically wake up around like 5, because I have calls with like the East Coast folks in Europe or India, and I will like the other day I got up at 5. My co-founder was going to bed. And so it's just like that kind of vibe that's going on, where like everyone is incredibly autonomous, because at this stage in the startup, like there's no managers. You have to be self-driven, self-motivated. And we know exactly what we need to do. Obviously after syncing, we use Auctor, by the way, to do our syncs. But everyone's just doing their own thing, right? And we have to have that trust in each other that we're going to deliver. And so I'll wake up, I basically am on calls all day. I'll do some product design and syncing with like the product team at the end of the day, where we plan out our sprints and things like that. But yeah, it's just work. It's work like every single hour.
So no like baseball games. Do you guys get out? Like, do you guys carve out like Friday night? We're taking 4 hours out to go out to dinner or a game or something.
Yeah. So YC, like Y Combinator, they have, like I said, these events where they'll invite very like prominent tech folks to have events, to host dinners, and they really encourage you to meet the rest of the YC batch, because these guys everyone within YC are literally the smartest people in whatever space that they're building in. And so it's obviously very important to just like get out there, socialize a bit. But yeah, like past those events, maybe we'll we'll have like company dinners where we'll just like, we'll all eat together at a restaurant, not at our desks. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just all so driven to make something that people really, really want and actually will see genuine benefits from, that's just, that trumps all. So yeah.
So how do you guys resolve conflicts? Because we're talking
Yeah.
like 4 individuals with like equal responsibility, like so no one's less, no one's more.
Yeah.
So there's no reporting structure. So
Yeah,
how do you
yeah.
guys deal with conflicts?
That's an amazing question. Yeah. How do we resolve conflicts? I think the biggest thing is just being incredibly transparent and attacking it when it happens, instead of letting it kind of just like sit and broil. Like as soon as like you disagree, be very respectful, but say it as soon as you feel it. Obviously, if you're like super emotional, maybe calm down a bit. But like, I think there's no room to like hold grudges, especially how fast we're moving. Like you have to be fully concentrated and in the right headspace. And so if one of the other co-founders is doing something that's bothering you, like just have a conversation with them about it. It's kind of ironic, given that like we're talking about the SI and consulting space, like how much good communication can do, right? Like it's like it's as simple as that. But yeah,
I like that saying. So back to the platform. So is it fair to say that right now in the current state, Auctor is solely focused at the moment at the functional side, pretty much from pre-sales, proposals, solution docs, all the way down to user stories requirements. Is it fair to say that that's the current state
Yeah.
of what it supports?
Yeah. End-to-end, pre-sales to post-sales workflow, everything before you start doing configuration, we help streamline that process.
Awesome. And then, so what roles? So I know it's SIs. Let's say a bigger consultancy would leverage Auctor. Is there certain roles that you feel are the most likely that are going to be mainly using it versus others, like business analysts, probably not developers, PMs? Who's the roles targeted
It's a
for
great question.
with a bigger agency?
It's a great question. So the typical people that we're like chatting with, where they really see the value, and a lot of times is signing off, is like head of delivery, head of pre-sales or post-sales. I feel like organizationally it varies based on who you're talking to, but typically there's someone that's in charge of like the entire pre-sales process, and then someone that's in charge of like the post-sales, like the handoff to ultimately configuring. And so those are the people that really see the value. But when we're running the platform with these folks, like we really encourage everyone that can potentially touch the pre-sales to post-sales process to be on the platform, because the full ROI of what we're building is found when everyone within the firm is on this platform, kind of communicating and using it as the source of truth. Obviously, we have all of our different integrations to whatever tech stack you use, but when you use Auctor, like it's a very collaborative thing, right? It's not like, it's just one person with one account. And so like usually head of delivery, pre-sales, post-sales side of things, but it can go down all the way to like your BA. But also we have like your senior solution architect that's using it for discovery and generating those artifacts. So if you think about who's doing discovery, who's creating proposals, who's creating design docs and artifacts, things like user stories and acceptance criteria, it's like anyone that's doing that, Auctor is going to be able to touch.
Have you had a chance to interact with people on the ground, like your end users? And you'll be amazed to see how many times these heads of delivery, head of practices are clueless in terms of the real problems the people on the ground are facing.
Yes. Like sometimes, like I think in the much bigger organizations, it's tough. And I think that's just the nature of like a scaled company. Not saying it's an excuse, but like it's just a lot harder to manage like a ton of people and like be fully aligned. But I think at the mid-market and at the SMB level, these senior folks are still very tapped into, the folks on the ground that are doing all of these different things. But yeah, like I think, in some instances, maybe there's a bit of a disconnect where the folks on the ground maybe have certain pains, but then the decision makers maybe aren't as aware. So yeah.
And I know you mentioned tribal knowledge, and I know you touched on it, and I had a couple of combos with you about that. I know you briefly touched on it a bit, but what's the benefit of tribal knowledge, especially when there's a bunch of people on a project in a company? I'm assuming if people leave, they don't take all the knowledge with them. That also stays intact. I guess I know tribal knowledge is a concept you refer to a lot. Can you talk about that and why it's important?
Of course. So it's like, let's say on your delivery team, like there's this one solutions architect that is just like really, really good. And he just produces great artifacts, great outputs, knows how to run discovery, but all of a sudden he leaves. And now what? Like the bar is so high, they just left, and now you can't run projects because, he's gone. And so what we're able to do is we're able to allow these firms to leverage tribal knowledge in the form of previous context, documents, and artifacts that have been generated, and which ultimately, when we create this knowledge graph for the system integrators that use our platform, it's as if that senior solutions architect is still there, right? Their way of work, their way of thinking, how they systematically produce artifacts and outputs is stored within this knowledge graph so that you can leverage it even for the junior folks. And I think that's where a lot of firms have really found value to. It's like now these junior folks don't have to spend a year onboarding to basically the way of work of these implementation firms. Like now they're enabled by using the platform because all of that quote unquote tribal knowledge is already there. And so you're able to immediately hit the ground running 7 levels ahead instead of starting at ground zero.
So talk us through a little bit about your emphasis on the data security, the trust layer.
Yeah.
Because I think like the Salesforce versus ServiceNow is a classic example these days. Like, both players are fighting for the CRM space. But typically what happens in the enterprise space is if you're a Microsoft shop, you will end up being a Microsoft shop. Same with like Salesforce, Oracle, SAP. Because for all these decision makers, we're talking about like CIOs, CTOs at like a Starbucks or a Delta. They want, if shit, I mean, excuse my French here, but when shit hits the ceiling, they want someone to point finger and say, make my problem go away, or like, prevent it. They don't want to be the person dealing with it because they have a full-time job, they have other things to do. So they don't want to be the person taking care of all of this. So tell us, how are you guys like positioning yourself in an ecosystem where there's like, these giants with massive teams, with massive trust layer, zero copy and all of this respectfully as a early stage AI startup? How are you guys handling that?
Yeah. So when we built the company and the platform from the ground up, data security and privacy and compliance was top of mind, even from the first lines of codes that we wrote. And so we take all that incredibly seriously. Every single one of our customers on our platform, they have their own fully containerized instance of the platform hosted on, like, for example, like AWS or Azure's infrastructure, where there's no cross-pollination of your data with our other customers on the platform. And not only that, the IP that you generate on our platform stays your IP. So let's say for whatever reason, we stop working with one of these system integrators and they have full ownership of everything they generate on the platform. They take it back to themselves. We wipe it clean on our end, and then we delete that instance, and it's as if they were never there, right? And so, especially working with some of our bigger customers on the platform, like you said, that is like, that's like number one question that gets asked. And so we're incredibly compliant on that front. So we're hoping to get SOC 2 by either the end of the month or at the start of next month. We've gone through extensive penetration testing and passed with flying colors. And so like really keeping data security and privacy the top of mind.
I see.
And so if we flip now to moving forward, I would essentially call this like phase one, whatever we call it. Let's just call it one, right? This is like right now. Where do you see Auctor going to with like phase two, phase three, just for a lack of a better terminology? Where do you feel this might be heading for Auctor and you guys?
Yeah, so I see a world where Auctor powers the end-to-end software implementation from your very first discovery call all the way to go live, and even just like maintenance. And naturally, when I say that, right, there's a concern that it's saying like, all right, Auctor is going to replace, me, right? And like, it's a valid concern, just like every other industry where AI is really disrupting it. However, I think the answer to that is realizing that what we're building, like what we're realizing and how we've built the platform is to ensure that that human is always in the loop. Because what's unique about this industry is the human touch. And that is something you will never be able to replace with AI or computers. And by the time that we do, and we are at AGI, we will have much bigger problems to worry about than just like our jobs. Like that, that's like a whole dystopian movie right there.
True.
So before then, what I see Auctor is a platform that really allows you to emphasize the human touch, the part where like AI can't do. And it's like developing relationships with your client, making sure that it's everything that a computer can do. And so everything before that, like we should be able to make your life as easy as possible to give your clients and your customers the most seamless and smooth implementation process. And so that's what we're trying to do. And so, yes, right now we are tackling what we believe is the root cause of a lot of problems in implementations, and that's misalignment with your clients' requirements and design. However, the next step on our product roadmap is going into the configuration side of things, being able to build out your accelerators 50, 60% of the way there, and which we will be able to enable you to get to go live much faster. And so ultimately being able to have the end-to-end software implementation process on one platform and just allowing you to really leverage that for your firm and basically 10xing your efficiencies and your output without ever having to hire more headcount.
What has helped me remain sane in this whole AI thing is like I always draw parallels with when I was in my like really, really young age when computers were a thing. So people were talking about like people using typewriters their whole career and they were like, now we need to switch to computers. The
Yeah.
human race survived. So I always
Yeah.
try to draw parallels. Like I think like human race is going to survive. It's just we all will have to like reskill, upskill, cross skill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I bring that up on LinkedIn and social media as well. I think we're at the time where people need to start going up a layer and learning new platforms that are going to do the work. Kind of like what Avinash is saying there, and not be afraid of it, not be timid, but actually embrace it and learn these new platforms, tools, terminology. Because I think it's going to generate a whole new potentially name of positions and roles and what people do, like what you're saying, Will. I think it's going to transform fast with the human side of things.
Yeah, no,
And
totally.
just what we do. I don't know what the job titles would be, or roles, but I think they're going to be something we haven't even thought of yet.
I 100% agree. I think a lot of it is being able to adapt, and that's also the human element, right? Like I think with AI, I truly believe, maybe I'm an optimist, I truly believe that more jobs are going to be created because of how much efficiencies we can gain and how much more time people have to now focus on the harder problems that humans are good at, while AI does more of the mundane and automatable tasks. And so, yeah, I think part of that, though, is to be able to adapt your role and your skill set and familiarizing yourself with what's out there, right? Because unfortunately, like there are always going to be folks that are looking for the next technology to make themselves more efficient and, things like that. And so if you don't look for that, those folks that do are going to go ahead and then it's like a battle of like, all right, now I have to really stay up to date. So it's like if I was still using a typewriter today, I would be putting it at myself at a disadvantage just naturally. And so it's like, I'm going to have to learn how to use a computer, right? And so it's like things like that where I think people will have to just start to learn to adapt. And the same goes with me, right? Like how I code is now going to be different given all of these AI toolings versus how I did it 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy time.
Yeah.
So I guess the kind of last question, because that was great, Will.
Yeah.
Where's Will and your co-founders gonna be in 3 to 5 years? Where do you guys see yourselves personally, Auctor, everything? Like what's the vision? Where are you going?
Yeah. So like I said, in terms of the vision of the product, really just being able to help facilitate the end-to-end process of a software implementation and just making it as enjoyable as possible, right? For the end user of whatever software is being implemented and ultimately the firm or the professional services team that's doing it. As for ourselves, it's a big question. Where do I see myself in 3 years? Where do I see the rest of the co-founders? Building, like just continuing to make the platform and Auctor as good as possible and as enjoyable as possible for our end customers. And I think I think this is as corny as it sounds, like this is what I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to make something of my own, make something people want. And it's so gratifying to see, something that you've created from nothing resonate with folks that, it's actually impacting their lives, making them more efficient, making their lives easier. There's this one guy that reached out to me. He was like, yeah, like I'm looking for a platform that, makes things more efficient so I can spend more time with my family. It's like, wow, okay. Like I'm able to do that for you. And so it's like these things where it's like the feedback that you get from these folks that are using the platform, that's really what keeps you pushing. So yeah.
Well, we hope that the product that you build will eventually make the consultants' Monday scaries go away.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's the whole thing, right? Like now you're excited to go in on Monday.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Awesome. It's awesome, Will. And thanks for being a guest on the podcast. That was great.
Yeah.
I think this is really good for Salesforce SIs. And I think we both felt this is good for them to learn and understand and hear about these latest trends. So it was great having you on. And it's getauctor.com, correct?
Yeah. getauctor.com. So GETAUCTOR.com.
Awesome. Great having you on, Will. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Awesome. Thanks again.